Check 1, 2. Check 3, 4. Check 5, 6. Check 7, 8.
I call to order this. Yeah, I do. Sorry. Anyways, I call to order this regular meeting of the Anthony Wayne Board of Education. It is Monday, May 15th at 6 p.m. Carrie, would you please call roll?
Mr. Baden? Here. Mrs. Brent?
Here.
Mrs. Gwynn? Here. Mr. Lutz? Mr. Miller?
Okay, would you rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, the first item on our agenda is to approve the minutes from our April 13th meeting. If everyone's had a chance to read that, I need a motion to approve. Kyle? And a second? Jana? And Carrie, would you please call roll?
Mr. Baden? Yes. Mrs. Brent?
Yes.
Mrs. Gwynn? Mr. Lutz? Yes. Mr. Miller?
All right. Is that not on?
Testing.
Carrie, treasurer's report?
Thank you. First item on the agenda this evening is to approve the monthly financials for April 2023 as presented. Under item B is to approve the donations as listed. We had $600 donated for the DECA Career Development Conference, a Discovery cargo enclosed trailer valued at $17,323.20 to the Anthony Wayne Band Program. This is from the Anthony Wayne Band Boosters. And then we had some teachers awarded the Martha Holding Jennings Foundation grant. This was an award to a couple teachers at Waterville, and then several donations for Teacher Appreciation Week. So we're very appreciative of all those donations. Mm-hmm. Next item on the agenda is to approve the 5-year forecast for the May 2023 submission. We had our 5-year work session on April 26th. You can see that the format that I have presented tonight is the submission format. Just going to hit on a couple things. First off, we originally approved the 5-year forecast in November, so this is an update that is required by law. It's due by May 31st. But just to highlight a couple things, our revenue for this year is going to be, for this fiscal year, is going to be $45,900. 73% of our revenue comes from real estate taxes.
45 million.
Oh, excuse me, 45.9 million, sorry about that. Lighting's not good up here, I can tell you that, especially when you wear glasses. But moving forward with our real estate, we're looking at a slight increase of 2.15% each year, and that's strictly just due to growth in new construction in the district, which obviously we continue to have that going on. There is a county reappraisal in calendar year 24 that will collect in calendar year 25. I do want to point out one thing that's a factor in our real estate line item, actually in our personal public tax, and this is the Nexus pipeline. This is currently at the level of the Supreme Court for a decision. It was actually the tax commissioner reached an agreement with Nexus back in September, and all of 13 counties had to agree to this, and there was the exception of one county that did not agree to this, and they filed an appeal. So after the appeal, there was another 3-month pause, and Nexus filed for a motion to dismiss. And after another 2-month pause, 60 days, the county auditor filed an appeal again. So now it's with the Supreme Court. And I just share that just because there is a lot of money invested with the Nexus pipeline that technically should go to the schools and other municipalities that are out there that have pipelines in their district. When Nexus first came to the district, we were supposed to get nearly $6 million annually, and we are receiving about $2 million a year. So granted, we're appreciative of the funds, but they're tender paying based at 38%, but the value of the pipeline is at 100% on our district valuation. So it's not exactly a fair picture of how the funding's working, because then that affects the next thing, which is our state funding, which is only 16% of our revenue. That's partially, there's a new funding formula, and we're at the end. June 30th will be the end of the current biennium budget. Right now, the current House Bill 33 for the next biennium budget is with the Senate. I heard today that it's likely we won't see or hear anything, or it won't reach the governor's desk till possibly the third week in June. So we won't even know what our funding is, but we have to forecast for 5 years. So we're all used to that, although it is a little confusing. But with our state funding, our valuation is factored in there, but $60 million of our valuation is based on the Nexus pipeline, and they're not paying their full amount. So it's a little frustrating, especially when our revenue is fixed. So moving on to the expenditures, our expenditures are $46.2 million. You can see that we do have a deficit of roughly $300,000 between now and June 30th. Salary and benefits equal 84% of our operating budget, which is actually pretty good for our district. Most districts see that around 89 to 93%, and so I feel that we do a great job with that. The salary and benefits currently does have the pending union contracts that are presented tonight for your approval in the 5-year forecast, as we discussed. And it also includes the insurance adjustments, and the renewal with Paramount is 0% for the next 2 years on our premium. So purchase services and supplies, just like everybody in here, everybody's household's affected. Well, our budget's affected too by this, the increase in cost, whether it be maintenance, repairs, utilities, fuel, supplies. It's everywhere, so we're seeing that. So at the end of the fiscal year, we're looking to end with roughly $4.8 million of a cash balance. It's okay, but in a district this size, we would like to see a little bit more. But from where we were at in November to where we're at now, we have minimal change. The only thing I really did was update actual revenues as of what we have today, and then update our expenditures that we're aware of. So I have school, even though the foundation, our state funding, they're working on the biennium budget, it's flatline based on this year. Although we do stand to see a little bit of growth, we just hope it's no less. So I feel like there's a lot going on within the budget, but it's usually like this when you have a biennium budget that's not yet approved. So any questions on the 5-year forecast?
None. I guess we're good.
Next item on the agenda is a recommendation that you approve participation in the group rating program with Shakely Uniservice as our third-party administrator for workers' compensation for the period of July 1 of 24 through December of 24.
January 1.
January
You
1.
said July.
I cannot see. It's bad. January 1 of 24 through December 31st of 24 at a cost of $1,975. We've worked with Shakely for years. We've worked with a different consultant, which was Dave Kotarabic. He has since retired, and we are just working fully with Shakely. So
Good.
they've done great for the district, though, so I'm pleased to continue our relationship with them. Next, I recommend that the board approve the membership renewal with the Alliance for High Quality Education at a cost of $4,000. This is effective July 1 of '23 through June 30th of '24. This is no increase, and this group is just a big advocate for public education. I think they do a great job. So we would like to continue with that membership. Next, I recommend that the board approve the annual motion to authorize the treasurer to deduct one meeting's pay from each board member for the Flower Fund. This would be on your July 23rd pay date, and this is for employees and former employees that pass. So, and then the last item on the agenda is to, or my agenda, I'm sorry, is to approve the resolution for the Master Electric Energy Sales Agreement. This is currently extending the electric buying at a fixed rate, but we're currently in the program now, and we are locking in, and this is through the Ohio Schools Council that we pay to participate. They have a program called Power for Schools, but we are locking in a kilowatt-hour rate of 0.05635, and it's through the same supplier, which is NG, I think that's how you pronounce it, Resources. So basically, we're just extending this and getting the rate, so.
Okay.
Is that yearly? Is that just a yearly update?
Actually, this goes through June of '25.
Any other questions for Carrie? Or were you finished, Carrie?
Yes, sorry, I was
Okay,
just making
that's
sure.
okay.
I can't see up here.
Any other questions for the treasurer? No? If not, I need a motion to approve the treasurer's report. Was that Troy?
Troy.
Troy, and a second, please?
I'll second.
Jeff. And Carrie, would you please call roll?
Mr. Baden?
Yes.
Mrs. Brent?
Yes?
Mrs. Gwynn? Mr. Lutz? Mr. Miller? Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Superintendent educational reports.
Thank you. I'm going to help them get ready for their presentation, so I'm going to go down and grab the mic and
Okay.
get that ready. But
All right.
if you guys want to sit up.
No, I'm good. No.
So thank you. I'm going to turn it right over to the collaborative to share with us their findings as well as the recommendations for the facilities master plan.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Fritz. Good evening. Again, I'm Dave Serra with the Collaborative. We're the planning firm that's working with the district now for a little over a year, trying to get to tonight here, which is ultimately our recommendation to the board for what the district master plan might look like. So for agenda this evening, want to talk about a little bit of the timeline, some of the stuff we shared at the community session a week or two ago, but kind of want to go through that again. Want to walk through the timeline of what we've been working on the past year, talk a little bit about the building assessments. I know we presented that at the board in February. I know there were some questions that came from the community, so want to go back through that as well. Had a number of community surveys that went out to solicit kind of comments and feedback as we were working through this process. So want to walk through those results with the board again. And then after that first round of community survey results, that generated a number of initial concepts that we're going to present, that we presented at the community session, and we're going to present again tonight. There were 3 building concepts and then 3 kind of sports facilities concepts. And ultimately, at the end of this, we'll make our recommendation and then turn it over to the board for any questions you guys might have of us this evening. So starting with the timeline, we've been in this process for almost a year. So if you look, May of last year, we kicked off this process and spent pretty much the entire summer of last year walking through all your facilities, doing the building assessments, coming up with a lot of that data. I think that'll be posted to the website if that's not out there already. So community members, anyone else that wants to see that information, that'll be made available, and we'll go through a little bit of that later. Spent late last year kind of going through the reports, refining those, working with Matt Dick and Dr. Fritz and others to kind of refine those to get into a format that might best serve the district. And along the way, had a number of meetings, just going over thoughts and feedback from the community of what we were hearing. In the early part of this year, we had an enrollment study. District had an enrollment study done by a firm out of Columbus that does that, and we'll share a little bit of those results later. But that took about a 3 or 4 month process looking through death rates, birth rates, new construction in your community, kind of what the trends looking out over the next 10 years might be for the district. In February, we presented it to the board, and that was really that building assessment piece where we kind of walked through what we found from the building assessment and what our findings were. In that same time, that first community survey kind of went out to ask for guidance from the community of what they thought was priorities in building projects potentially and athletic projects. We took that feedback in February and started to come up with concepts. Again, then presented at the community session in May, put another survey result out, got some additional feedback back, and kind of tweaked the final presentation for you here tonight. So we're here tonight at the board to present that, and then ultimately, looking to finalize the report for the district based off the recommendations and then whatever kind of comments, feedback we get from the board. So building assessments, I think we talked about this in February, but really the importance of the building assessments are trying to understand what you have. You've got some older buildings that we'll go through, but number of additions been put on them, but very well maintained. You want to understand how much longer do you have in your roof systems, your mechanical systems, your electrical systems. So kind of tried to analyze all of those systems for you. And then came up with a deferred maintenance plan. And you'll see we kind of have 2 categories, an immediate need and maybe a little bit long-term need that we've identified, and try to kind of put that into some of the schemes as well. And then really, what do you need to attack right now in terms of your buildings to keep them up and operational? So we looked at all your facilities other than White House Elementary, which was new, and then the bus garage, which was new. We did not go through those facilities just because they were so new and didn't think they needed those. But we did really spend days at each one of the other facilities that you have with our engineers, walked through, documented as much as we could, photographed as much as we could, measured as much as we could to really give you a really good assessment. This is just really reminding everybody of the facilities you have and the age. And as you see, some of your facilities are approaching 70, 60 years old. The old White House Elementary was even older. That's why that building came down. That was beyond its useful life. But if you're thinking about what the next 10, 20 years look like, you're going to have a number of facilities that are going to be 90, 70, 80 years old. And you want to make sure you're investing in those facilities to keep them up and operational in good shape. This is just one example. This was Monclova Elementary. This is a format we used for each one of your buildings. This is just a cover sheet that really starts to analyze an overall grading system that you see, kind of the red, green, yellow, orange, and red. Kind of green is really good condition, red is you need to replace it. There's about 400 items that we look at as we go through each one of your buildings and kind of grade them based off that grade scale, looking at the age, looking at how they're functioning today, looking at things like your roof, and do you have handicap accessible measures in each of the schools, and how are your finishes, your lighting, things like that. That starts to get into some of this detail here. So again, this is just an example of some of the detail we go into when we look at the windows and exterior. We look at the site. We looked at the asphalt, the landscaping, the condition of the ceilings, flooring, the doors, whether all your doors had handicap accessible hardware on them. And then really graded those as the different color as we were using our professional opinion and building codes to say, yes, this is within current building codes, or some of these items, especially when you start to get to like the electrical systems, you'll see that's kind of a constant over all the buildings. Electrical systems, they're mostly existing, they're at their useful life. You really need to look at starting to replace some of those electrical systems. Your roofing's the same way. Your roofing, Matt and others did a really good job of keeping those watertight with a lot of patching and things like that, but there are some significant cost in roofing, electrical, and mechanical systems. That's kind of the constant theme throughout the district. We also photographed everything. I know there were some comments back that we got from the community of kind of the level of detail, so we just wanted to show you that, just didn't do a cursory walk through the building. We spent hours documenting, walking every roof, walking every mechanical room in every building, trying to understand really the overall condition of each facility, and then doing the same on the inside. We developed cost estimates for each one of the schools as well. So this is just an example of kind of the line item level of detail that we went into. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, we wanted to identify kind of your immediate needs, which we identified in the left-hand category in red there, the BL, that was a bond levy kind of category, and then a PI category, which is maybe something that could be repaired over the course of 5 to 10 years using your permanent improvement dollars, as maybe not something that is as immediate need as that kind of bond levy work that we identified. So taking all that into consideration, we did a kind of a district summary for you, listed each of the schools that we looked at, kind of the overall grades. Again, you'll see the electrical systems, kind of scoring low in a number of them. That was the mechanical systems kind of in that medium category there. Transportation building on the outside, I don't know if everyone's looked at that building. That needs some work on the outside. That's from the architectural condition. The siding, the roofing, the windows, things like that are in pretty disrepair. So summing all of those buildings up, we kind of did, again, that high and low range for the bond levy work, and then a high and low range for permanent improvement work. I circled up that bond levy work because you'll see those being factored into some of the cost estimates that we do down the road. So when we're giving you the options for the various building options, we've included the bond levy portion of the deferred maintenance in there because we felt like those were immediate needs that you should take care of now. The initial kind of community survey that happened in February, so I'm going to walk through those findings now. That was put out to the community for about a week and a half. Got a really good response back from the community, a lot of feedback that really started to shape some of the building concepts and the athletic concepts that you'll see here shortly. There were probably 40 plus questions. We're not going to go through all of those, but we did want to touch on a number of the questions that kind of influenced some of our concepts. And this was, pick your top 3 highest priorities with the district would determine to renovate, replace, or build new. And, safety and security was always a really high priority. The physical condition of the school, making sure the buildings are upkept and invest in those deferred maintenance dollars. And then really, as the district increases in enrollment, community kind of said, hey, you should look at increasing enrollment potentially through additions and not potentially looking at the overall like building new. So there's a number of questions about the overall cost as well. So there was about 850 respondents to this question. There were 3. Each person could select 3 items, so there was about 2,500 individual responses. And the cost, overall cost of the project, I know that came up before. There's about 200 responses to that said that was in their top 3. So not that it's not important, but that was just how the community voted that the cost wasn't in the top 3. So I just wanted to clarify that, as I know that came up in a number of the community feedback questions that we got kind of after the fact. Another big topic was, should the district take a look at including all-day kindergarten? I know right now that is not the case, and it seemed like pretty overwhelmingly, 61% of the people that voted said that was important, and that was a very high need, and we should look at that as we started to develop building concepts, how we could potentially incorporate all-day kindergarten into your existing facilities, whether that was through additions or other measures that we'll kind of walk through with you. And then this one was just really dealing with, should you take a look at renovating and adding additions to your existing schools, or potentially look at doing some new construction. And, from the people that did have an opinion, the item in blue there said, hey, they prefer not to redistrict, add classrooms to current buildings as needed to accommodate that all-day kindergarten, as well as potential future growth. So those were kind of the three big takeaways, I think, for us as we started to look at the building concepts to really help us form some ideas that then went back out to the community for additional input. There was a whole other segment of questions that kind of dealt with your sports facility complex. And, this one just touched on what's the preference between natural grass or turf. There's a fair amount of people who didn't have an opinion, but, the people that did have an opinion, for the most part, and it kind of breaks it down by sport there, thought remaining on natural grass. It was close in some of these, but it seemed like the predominant opinion from the community was, if you're going to improve the athletic facilities, keep them as natural grass. You'll see that in the costing. We did do an alternate for turf as well, just so the board could see the cost differences between what a natural grass facility might look like versus artificial turf. There was another kind of question just about other general improvements as you look around and you go to other districts' athletic facilities and attend sporting events. What are some of the challenges Anthony Wayne specifically faces? And seating was a big one, the lack of seating at football, lack of seating at soccer, lacrosse events. Parking, is a challenge. There's only so many of the games that it's a challenge at, but again, parking. And then the floodplain, your football field, some of your parking. There's a number of areas, the band practice facility right now are in the floodplain. And, is there an option to take a look at raising those facilities out of the floodplain, which we do and can walk through with you here as we get into some of the building concepts. So jumping into building concepts, we really wanted to start just with your existing facilities and what you have today. So starting with your primary buildings, what those building floor plans look like, how they're arranged, and then what the current enrollment, this was the enrollment of December of last year. So you see those are all around that 550, 540 mark. I know there was some input about trying to get an elementary school that was under 500 students. We looked at that as well, and what that might mean to reduce the capacity of each one of those schools and provide all-day kindergarten. Going up to your secondary schools, again, just the floor plans of what you have today and the enrollments at each one of those individual buildings. I mentioned the enrollment study. So earlier this year, in January through about March, Cooperative Strategies was hired to look at your district. They came back with a enrollment study that suggested that your enrollment is looking like it's going to stay pretty flat. They're thinking that there's potentially about a 36 student increase here, looking out to 2033. So that could potentially change, but with the information they have, again, and with the birth rates, the death rates, the construction types, things like that, that was their recommendation back to the district. So I'm going to jump into the building concepts. We're going to walk through 3 building concepts that we call Concept 1, 2, and 3, and then I'll give what we feel our recommendation is, then we'll step to the athletic concepts, do the same thing, walk through A, B, and C, give our recommendation, and then open it up for additional discussion. So Concept 1, and this is pretty similar in all of them. We wanted to make sure we included the deferred maintenance, the immediate deferred maintenance costs in all of these 3 concepts. We heard from the community that was important to make sure the buildings are going to last you another 20, 30 years. So addressing those immediate needs in electrical and roofing was important. We included that. These looked at increasing the enrollment because of all-day kindergarten. We know we need additional classroom space to accommodate that. So this looked at keeping your elementaries like they are and putting additions onto them to add additional space for kindergarten, all-day kindergarten, as well as some other needs. In this scenario, pre-K students would all go to Monclova Primary. that school is built big enough that that's got capacity to handle all-day kindergarten as well as pre-K for the district in that facility. And then the high school, junior high, and the middle school to remain as they are today. And then we look at a number of additions to those that I'll explain in a little bit more detail. So again, this is concept one. Monclova stays as it is. The occupancy, I think, was 540 today. That would potentially go up a little bit with the all-day kindergarten. But again, no additions needed to Monclova, just to the number of classrooms and the size of Monclova. Waterville, we looked at the end of the two wings there. There's potential, when you take a look at the site and circulation and access, potential to get 6 to 7 additional classrooms off each of those two wings, as well as off the wing by the cafeteria there for some special programs. White House, similar fashion, a little bit of a tighter site, but there is some area on the site to the right there that in the dark gray you could see adding some additional classrooms to White House to give you that opportunity to have all-day kindergarten there as possible as well. Jumping up to the middle school, junior high, and high school. Again, these buildings would remain as they are today. Starting with the middle school, we looked at kitchen, cafeteria, dining expansion. We know that space is very tight. That would give some additional overflow space to the cafeteria and the kitchen area. To the bottom, in the dark gray there are some existing locker rooms. It seemed like when you look at the overall site plan, there's a need from the athletic standpoint for additional locker room space. You don't today have dedicated lockers for soccer, girls lacrosse, girls track, or boys. This option looks at potentially putting girls additional sports kind of in the end of the middle school. It's close to the softball field, close to the existing softball field and track as well. Going over to the junior high, which is in the bottom right-hand corner there, this starts to take a look at a potential additional classroom wing to free up some additional space in the junior high. Enlarging or putting an addition onto the band room. We know that is a growing need as well. And then looking to expand the cafeteria kitchen area as well, like we did in the middle school. High school would remain kind of as it is today. Performing arts, again, has some needs that we heard that would be addressed. So in this option, the high school would get a lecture performance addition and then some additional storage built in for those needs, and whether it goes there or somewhere else. And again, these aren't designs. I didn't mention that earlier. These are just kind of overall concepts. Should the board choose to move forward with any of these, and there'd be a lot more detail that would go into exactly what these spaces are, but from a 10,000-foot level, overall high level that we deal with in kind of these planning exercises, these are kind of the overall space sizes that we feel you need. So that was concept one. This starts to get into some costing. Just wanted to, again, identify where those different additions would go on to give you a little more context on the site and how the buildings are arranged. So again, you could, to the bottom, see that locker room addition off the middle school and its relation to the soccer and softball, so that potentially is an ideal location. And then kind of gives you the cost over there. Again, we included the deferred maintenance, that's that first list, included what potential costs would be to put these additions on at each school. We're going to have site work, site utilities, other kind of involvements as you put an addition on, so we wanted to include costs there, and then include soft costs. Soft costs are fees, permitting, furniture, technology, to give you kind of a total project cost for concept one. Concept two. So again, we want to look at addressing all of your immediate deferred maintenance needs. This takes a look at what if you decrease the enrollment, got that below that 500 student count that was mentioned in the past. To do that, this option takes a look at renovating Fallen Timbers into a new primary school. You'd still have the all-day kindergarten that you can put in each one of the elementary schools, plus potentially Fallen Timbers as a new primary school. Pre-K would remain as stated in concept one. Then we would renovate the existing junior high and move the middle school kids into the junior high. And then the high school, you'd move the junior high kids into the existing high school. And then this concept looks at building a new high school over on the Buca Road campus. So a little bit of a shift around from how your buildings kind of are aligned today. So this concept two now gets you to 4 primaries. You wouldn't have to put additions on to White House or Waterville. Monclova to remain. Fallen Timbers would become a primary. You'd still want to potentially look at doing the girl locker room addition to address some of those needs there, and the kitchen cafeteria needs expanded in any scenario. But this would be 4 primaries. This then looks at renovating the junior high, making that the new middle school. And then really, you wouldn't need to touch the high school to make that the junior high, so you could shift the junior high kids into the high school, has plenty of room and capacity to do that. And then you've got 140 acres on Buca Road. So this option looks at building a new high school with parking, access, things like that over at the Buca Road campus. So again, just gives you, at least at the high school campus today, kind of what the shift potentially would be in the schools, with the junior high being the existing high school, the middle school, and the primary school. And then we just showed a big circle kind of over at your Buca Road campus off to the right-hand side, up by your central admin building, that plenty of space there. Doing that, we understand, comes with a really large price tag. So the building, the new high school alone, is $70-80+ million. But wanted to explore that option. That was an option that in that first round of community results did have a lot of favorability, where people are saying, hey, let's take a look at least what a new high school would look like. We did that, and those are the costs kind of associated with it. Concept 3 does a lot of the same things that Concept 2 does. Deals with the deferred maintenance, decreases the enrollment, renovates Fallen Timbers, again, as a new primary school. The big move here is building, instead of building a new high school over at the Buca Road campus, you build a new 5-6 middle school there. So the junior high would stay in this option, the high school would stay in this option, and we looked at what happens if you build a new middle school. So again, you'd end up with your 4 primaries, still again the additions to Fallen Timbers. High school, junior high would remain as we had in Concept 1 with the needed additions, but then a new middle school potentially would go over at the Buca Road campus. Again, a site plan of what that is, still a significant cost, lower, of course, than the high school, new high school concept, primarily just due to sheer size, and but still a pretty large price tag. So with that, we wanted to jump in a little bit, and this gives you just a little bit of a breakdown of each of the 3 concepts kind of compared side by side. So we wanted to share the community survey results number 2, because I think we asked specifically in that second round of survey results, after sharing these concepts with the community, kind of what was the community's thoughts and feedback. So as you can kind of see there, Concept 1 had about 45% of the vote. A close second, Concept 2, that was that new high school concept, and then Concept 3 was the new middle school. So 45% of the people that responded to that second survey said they preferred that option 1 of putting the additions onto the elementary schools in the upper grade schools and not building a new facility. So our recommendation, and again, this is just our recommendation, you as the board, will ultimately have to make a final decision on all of what we present tonight, but just looking at what we've been working on here over the last year, taking all of the feedback, the enrollment studies, the community survey results, our recommendation would be to potentially move forward with building concept one. We understand cost is really important to the community. You know, at times I need to take my consultant hat off and put my community member hat on as well. And, you know, my kids have gone through the schools. My son's a junior. And just understanding what's best for the district. And so using that, it was our recommendation that, you know, keeping the schools where they are, adding on to them, addressing the deferred maintenance to make sure you've got your buildings up and running for the next 20, 30 years, keeping them in good condition, and then really the significant cost difference between renovating and adding and then a new high school or a middle school was pretty substantial. So I'll pause there. Any comments? You want me to keep going?
I think you just keep going, unless you guys have questions for the building portion, if you just want to wait till the end to ask.
Sure. I could barely read it.
Yeah, I was just asking to go back to the slide that summarized the totals.
Yeah,
It's
so
just hard to see from this angle.
so concept one, that was about 45 million.
Okay.
So that dealt with the deferred maintenance piece. That also dealt with the additions to the elementary schools as well as the middle school, high school, and junior high. Concept two, that was about 122 million. That's the big jump there is that high school, the new high school cost, which was about 92 million of that. And then concept three was about 87 million. That was looking at potentially a new middle school.
Yeah, no, I heard it. I just couldn't see the number. I thought it said 122. It's a big number.
Any other initial comments? And I can come back at the end for sure. Well, I'll jump right into the sports facility concepts then. So this is the property you own. We wanted to just identify the Buca Road site. Again, you've got about 140 acres over where the central admin is. There's been some additional practice fields here added recently. There's an abundance of land here to do, whether it's a building project, athletic project, additional practice facilities down the road. You've got some flexibility there on that site for sure. We broke down the three athletic facility concepts similar to the building concepts. We call these A, B, and C instead of 1, 2, 3. Concept A looks at keeping all of your athletic facilities on the Finsel Road campus to address. This starts to get into some of the additional kind of community feedback that we heard. You know, the lack of seating, getting some of the athletic facilities out of the floodplain. Were probably two of the bigger drivers on this one. So you'll see off to the right-hand side, you've got the football field. You'll see that that's oriented in a different direction. So this concept looks at raising the football field out of the floodplain. Needs to be raised about 8 feet, and then rotating it so it's in the correct direction of a football field. This would entail new bleachers, new press box, adding on to your existing concession stand for additional storage, additional locker room space need. I think we talked about golf simulators, trying to get some of the sports that maybe don't have facilities today incorporated. Your tennis courts would stay like they are. Those were recently moved. To raise the football field out of the floodplain, we'd have to build a retaining wall around it because of the height you've got to raise that to and to not impact that existing drive and parking lot in those tennis courts. So you kind of see an outline of a black line there. That's what that's representing. This concept looks at completely redoing the track in the soccer and lacrosse complex, widening the track so that you've got more runoff space for soccer and lacrosse, adding bleachers to the other side of the complex that don't exist today. Again, when you did those tennis courts a few years ago, all that was taken into consideration, and those were located properly, so you didn't have to do this twice, which was, you know, some good thinking. This also looks at bringing the softball complex out of the floodplain. There's just a portion of it, kind of the right-hand corners in the floodplain today, doing some additional amenities. Did some recent amenities to the softball complex, but just really kind of bringing that up similar to the high school. and then looks at the concession stand out by the soccer lacrosse stadium. You know, we dealt with maybe some of the female sports at Fallen Timbers. This looks to deal with some of the boy sports. So the concession stand would be expanded to get locker rooms for soccer, lacrosse, and men's track. Some additional storage needs that you need for the different athletic complexes as well. This is just an enlargement, so you can kind of see things a little bit easier, along with some additional pricing that kind of goes along with each one of the proposed moves. So the football stadium would have about 5,000 seat bleachers. Again, you know, new press box, other amenities that would go, new paths around there. You can see that retaining wall that I mentioned earlier in a little bit more detail. The new addition to the existing concession stand, be additional public bathrooms, be additional locker rooms, golf simulator, some additional storage, things like that. This would also give you the capacity to extend the baseball field. Right now, the outfield's kind of cut off because of the orientation of the football field. By rotating it, it frees up some space. We didn't really address that, but that's definitely an option that the district could consider if you wanted to do that. And then this blows up, just starts to talk about the soccer lacrosse stadium again, adding the bleachers to both sides, expanding that existing concession building for additional locker room storage space, and then bringing up the softball complex. Again, in the pricing, you'll see everything is natural grass as a base bid, and then we identified some alternate pricing for if you were to switch the infield of softball and baseball to turf, or the football field, or the soccer lacrosse complex as well. These are just the overall costs. So Concept A, again, I can't see that very well myself, but looking at about $22 million of total project cost, with an additional $3+ million with some additional alternates for different turf facilities throughout this option. Concept B is a little bit of a hybrid. So Concept B looks at leaving football where it is. Maybe that becomes a band practice facility. Maybe that opens it up to some more practice youth sports. And then where the existing soccer, lacrosse, track complex is, you would remove that facility and build a new football stadium in that location. That would then shift, which you'll see on the next slide, the new soccer, lacrosse, track complex over to the Buca Road campus. This would deal with softball in a similar manner that we did in Concept A. You'd still want to look at adding some additional locker room sports for some other sports, adding some additional storage for just the various sports needs. So again, this is a blow up of keeping that existing football field where it is, potential new locker room building outside of the new football field location. Baseball would stay relatively like it is. I think some irrigation and some other kind of minor items were brought up along the way. The rotating of the football field where the soccer complex is today, and then with some improvements to the softball stadium. And then this looks at on the Buca Road campus, where a possible new lacrosse, soccer, track complex could go with locker rooms, with about 3,000 seat bleachers on both sides, parking, all of your throwing events. Then potentially a track for cross country. Try to identify that there and dash that you've got some acreage out there that you could put some type of cross country route. And then potentially connecting down to Dutch. So you've got that off Buca Road today, and probably would want to make a secondary connection from a traffic standpoint down to Dutch Road. Going through cost again, you can kind of see the different details of each one of these items over here on Buca Road. And then ultimately the total project cost of about $25 million with another $3+ million with various synthetic turf alternates. The last concept, Concept C, this looks at what if you built all new varsity athletics over at the Buca Road campus. So again, you've got the space. You could build new baseball, softball. The large blue box in the middle is an indoor field house. There was a lot of kind of comments back from the community on having indoor practice space for weather and different seasons, moving tennis over here as well, and then making like not a multi-use, but a performance stadium. So this concept, you'd have football, soccer, lacrosse, and track all in that one stadium, with the track going around it, with the larger bleachers, the throwing events, and then plenty of space for some additional practice fields around this complex. What this does is then the existing facilities on Finzel could be used for junior high. There was a lot of comments back about the need for 2 tracks, the need for additional practice space. Ultimately, this gives you a ton of flexibility to do that. You can leave what you have today for those youth sports, for the junior high sports, and then potentially have your varsity sports out here at Buca Road. Again, going through a similar cost exercise of what all new facilities would look like and cost. The indoor field house is a chunk of that, so that's something that could be built now, that could be something that could be planned for, built in the future. I think a lot of these items are a la carte a little bit as we talk through, so it doesn't have to be these exact concepts. I think the board's got the flexibility to, if there are questions or you want pieces and parts of this, we can definitely move those around as well and look at some other options. But ultimately, this was the most expensive option just because of all the new work that you were doing. So this was in the $48 million range, including that indoor field house, with all new parking, drives, locker rooms. All of that would then exist out here on the Buca Road campus. So with that, are questions, or should we just keep plowing forward? Want me to go back before we make our recommendation?
So with this option C, right, let's just play that one forward. Would that leave room in the future for a new high school at the location as
It
well?
would.
Or does it eliminate the options?
No, you've got plenty of flexibility in that 140 acres that you have to build a new facility down the road, whatever age group that might be.
So any use of Buca Road for athletics still leaves the option
It does.
for building expansion?
Yep. Any other concepts on or questions on the athletic concepts? So this, again, just kind of gives you that overall breakdown presented. You want me to go through those, Jana? I'll get there. So before that, I will give our recommendation in a second, but did the same thing on the, again, I think as I look at myself as a community member and others was Concept A. I think you can improve your facilities, upgrade those to other similar districts. It's really a significant cost to go to Concept C, and I know that's something that gives you a ton of flexibility, and maybe there are some things down the road that you can do. But our recommendation, I guess, after hearing from the community, just going through this whole process, would be to recommend Concept A and improve the facilities on Finzel Road. There was a lot of, I guess, community feedback on driving, students back and forth, Concept C. There would be some inconvenience there of getting non-driving athletes to that campus to practice. The cost was significant as well. And then there was a lot of feedback of, if you kept the high school where it is today, the high school should remain where the athletic facilities are. And so if the recommendation was option 1, to keep the high school where it was, we felt like the high school athletic facility should stay with it.
So is there a time frame for each one of these? Like if we were to choose building concept 1, right, is that something that could be completed in 1 year, 2 years? you
Yeah,
have a sense
it's
of-
multiple years. So with whatever you're doing, you're probably looking at about a year of design, and depending on the additions, you're probably looking at a couple years of construction, and we'd have to work through the phasing and the sequencing, all kind of dependent on really what the final plan was. The
And I
athletic,
assume a
Go
new
ahead.
high school, like option 2 for the buildings, that would be a multi-year, even more, right?
yeah,
Is
you're
that-
probably looking at about 2.5 years just to construct a new high school. You're probably about a year, 15 months to design it, so that could be out there a little ways. Some of the sports options too, I guess, just to go back to that concept A, you know, if you were to raise and rotate the football field in its current location, which I think is, where am I at here? This option, you're probably looking at losing a football season. So I guess keep that in mind as if this concept were the one the board chose to move forward with and was supported by the community, then again, that would be probably a 6-month design period. Primarily with the floodplain, there's going to be some time just to get those approvals, and then, you know, probably a 9 to 10-month construction window. So you might have to look at playing football elsewhere for a year.
But options B and C would keep.
You could, yeah, you got the
everything
flexibility.
intact, right?
You
play
wouldn't, you
as-
wouldn't be impacted as much with the other options. I think this option as well, depending on when you did the track and when you redid, you'd have to kind of time that out to make sure you miss the seasons. But option B and C, you've got a ton of flexibility because you don't really impact these facilities. You know, you can be building new over on the Bucco Road campus and not affect here, and, you know, wait till those are done to start utilizing them, and then come back and modify these if you needed to. Yep.
Can you say how many people replied back to roughly, to each survey?
I think the first survey, we had about 880 respondents to that first one, and I think we had about half of that for the second one, so it was less than the first.
It is interesting to see how the community desires have changed a lot. When I was involved in doing this, I don't know, 20, 25 years ago with two previous superintendents ago. And, yeah, just completely different thought patterns now as there was back then. So, time has changed.
And Dave, you've given us a lot to think about, obviously, as
Yeah.
you present this and these options and your recommendations. And I think it's important to, to know that as we consider these options and consider your recommendations, it's important to know that, you know, like, as we mentioned, timelines and understanding, obviously, cost and associated with that. We have some work to do to make sure, you know, as we go through the facilities assessments again, your recommendations, that we understand those costs and have a responsibility to the community to make sure that we're doing what we need to do to make sure that we're spending that money very wisely and in the right areas. And we appreciate, you know, the work of the collaborative, the engineers, the contractors you brought in to look at the facilities and its current existing condition, and the work that you did to evaluate those, to give us the understanding of where we're at and what we need to do, whether it be short-term things right now we can do or some long-term things in the future. Because really, as you mentioned, I think in the first presentation to the board about the facilities assessments, that's an all-encompassing piece. There's stuff in there from for example, from the board office that we're not planning on doing in the near future, but, you know, some carpets are going to need to be replaced. Eventually, it's a 20-year-old building and things like that. You know, eventually those things are going to need to be replaced. There's some lighting and some other things in there that maybe we can do with some other funds instead of having to use permanent improvement funds or other things. So we're going to look at all of that and then take that information and make some recommendations to the board as well moving forward.
Yeah, and I guess I'd end on, this had some cost escalation built into it, but if this extends out multiple years, keep that in mind, like,
Yeah.
you know, you're going to expect a 5 to 6% construction increase here, year after year. the further some of these things don't get addressed, so.
Yeah, and locking people in, right,
Yeah.
to the, locking contractors in to this work too, because we're
Yep.
seeing that with the HVAC project, that now we bid out, now it's going to be a third time, because of the lack of contractors that want to bid those projects because they're so full with what they're doing, and then trying to secure them for even next summer in this next bid project.
Sorry, can I ask one more question? So
Sure.
It just, if my notes are right, the high school is 72 years old, right?
Yes.
At what point do you retire a building? Or is it always repairable?
You know,
I think
because
that's
it's
the
so
oldest
old,
building that we have.
it was built differently than it is today. So I guess that's one thing you've got going for you, is the bones of the building are in pretty good shape. And yes, there does become a time, if your building was deteriorating more and you hadn't been upkeeping it like you have been, yeah, there comes a time where you just say you're spending good money over bad and you shouldn't be investing into it any longer.
But we're not
So
there yet.
You're not there yet, but
Yeah, sorry, Jim,
No, it's okay.
that's just, it's an old building, right?
Yes.
We want to make sure it's,
2033. So it looked out 10 years. Good.
Any other questions for Dave? Thank you, sir.
Great, thank you.
Are we going to get a copy of this?
Yeah,
too?
so the presentation will be put on the website so everybody can view that, and hopefully we'll have that on there by tomorrow morning.
Okay. Oh,
And Dave, if you could hand me up that, when you disconnect your computer, I'd appreciate that. Thank you, Chris. Thank you. You're welcome. Did he take that with him? Yeah, we'll need that for him to speak, yeah.
oh, Chris took the
Yeah, Chris took the mic.
mic.
Yeah, Chris will need that mic back down here when you get a chance. Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda for me is state budget bill. I'm going to mention a few things for you at this time. The House Bill 33, the state budget bill, is currently in the Senate Education Committee. They're hearing testimony for and against that bill. Just know that I think as we talk about where it's at, what they're discussing, it's important to realize that currently the state of Ohio is $1.87 billion, said billion, dollars above their estimates in their approved budget for this year. 1.87 billion. That's, in addition to the over $2 billion that's in the rainy day fund at this time. I mention that because as I go through what's been discussed so far in the Senate Education Committee in regards to the budget bill, I have some concerns. As we look at what they're talking about, really it's about the fact that they feel that the funding level for the Fair School funding model should go back to FY18 level data. And I mentioned that that's the 2017-18 school year. And that's what's originally was proposed in the governor's proposal of the state budget. So imagine going to work tomorrow and your employer says, oh, by the way, we're going to pay you at the rate you were paid back in 2017 or 2018. And that's what we're currently being funded at that level, but there was an expectation when the Fair School funding plan was put in place that at this point we would at least be at fiscal year 21, which is not even this fiscal year.
Right.
And so in the House, I'll give them some credit before they send it over to the Senate, they did put it at FY22 levels, which we were actually surprised by. They did it last minute and they sent it over to the Senate. But the discussion in that committee now has been about moving it back. So I'm concerned about that, especially with the fact that they have $1.87 billion more than what they expected to have at this time, and the fiscal year is almost done. So it's a very interesting conversation going on in Columbus about where this fair school funding plan will be. Carrie mentioned a little bit in our state funding that we receive from them, and I'll talk about that when we talk about vouchers as well. Okay. As we talk about the 5-year forecast, I think it's important to understand, as Carrie mentioned, the fact that we're not getting that Nexus money when it was promised to us, especially in light of the hard push that they went through at that time, and the concerns we had from that going through our district to the point of now getting $2 million versus the $6 million that was promised actually by Nexus in their literature that they were putting out to our communities. And that's happened all across the state. And it's not just to the local schools, it's to our local governments as well, who have that pipeline running through their jurisdiction. So that's concerning as well. I'm also concerned as we move forward, with the state budget, the Fair School Funding Plan, also about House Bill 1. I mentioned that at the last board meeting, and the concern that we have in regards to how they're going to fund the decrease in the sales tax, I'm sorry, not the sales tax, but the income tax in the state of Ohio, which we believe that will happen and it'll benefit all of us, but how will that be funded moving forward? Because it takes money out of the budget and something has to fill that moving forward. So we'll see where that goes. We should know that by the end of June, but unfortunately that doesn't help us in our planning for the next school year as we try to do the 5-year forecast or future years moving forward. Our cash balance is about the same cash balance we've had for the last 4 years. We would like to see that go higher, and we have tried to look at our expenditures. We did not replace two teaching positions at the high school and one at Monclova based on numbers, but more importantly based on the fact that we were trying to reduce our expenditures because we have no idea where this is going to land at the state level as far as funding. And it's a big concern that we have, as well as what's going to happen with Nexus moving forward. The other item I want to mention about the budget that doesn't seem to be getting a lot of discussion, especially in light of how significant it will be, is the ESSER funds going away next year. We have spent those funds to provide student services in a variety of ways, whether it be intervention services or services to help those individuals who need it the most as students to prepare them to be able to learn. And that money goes away next year, and we're going to have to make some decisions on are we going to continue those services or eliminate those services, because we will not have the funds at that time to pay for those unless we want to dip more into the cash balance and reduce that even more. But there's only so much that we can do that at before the state comes in and says, oh, by the way, you need to put a levy on to raise more money because you can't be in fiscal caution. So I'm just sharing all of that with you because there's no discussion about that item going on in Columbus, but they are talking about, as I will talk about next, how we're going to, as a state, fund more private and charter schools. So I do want to move on to vouchers and the effect that has on us. And I won't go into this deeply, but I do want you to know where this is kind of at right now. My concerns are that, with privates and charter school funding, as a superintendent, I appreciate and value the fact that there are options for parents to have that option to send their children to a charter and or a private school. I've had conversations with parents that do that, and I totally understand that. But what I have a concern about is when they're funding a charter or private school up to maybe $7,500, and we're getting around $2,000 per student. I also have a major concern with the fact that there's no accountability, whether it be academics or financially, for the money that the taxpayers of Ohio are paying to go into those schools. We have to go through an audit every year financially with the state auditor's office. They do not. Where are those funds going and how are they being spent? We have no clue. So I do have concerns about that, especially in light of the fact that they're talking about putting more money into those institutions. I'm okay with that money going directly to them. I'm just concerned that we're not getting a clear understanding of how that money is being spent or what it's being spent on or who's taking that money. So as we continue to move forward, there's a discussion in the legislature right now about adding hundreds of millions of dollars into the voucher program. And where is that going? And what's that going to be? We're told that by the legislators, very frankly, that it's moving forward and you're not going to do anything about it. My concern is that if it's taxpayers' dollars, just like the scrutiny that we have, why don't we have the same requirements for all of us moving forward? So I just wanted to share that with you at this time. The great news that I want to share with you is that we just finished our staff appreciation celebrations. Teacher Appreciation Week was last week. I want to mention to you a few things that are just kind of going on right now. You drove into the campus, you saw a baseball game going on, a softball game. Our community engagement class providing a track night for youth in our community, back on the track facilities. There's so many stories of our students stepping out into our community, doing volunteer work. At the art show when I walk in, they're collecting Anthony Wayne ware to provide to families who come into our school district who may not be able to afford that, to give those to that student or that family so they can have some Anthony Wayne gear to wear as they come into our district. I think about the work that, especially at our junior high, but across all of our buildings, that they're doing for military families, the fact that all of those buildings are honored to be Purple Star buildings by the Ohio Department of Education for their work with the military families. I think about all the work that we do in our communities each and every year. It's just truly amazing, and I can't thank our staff enough and our students enough for being involved in that and organizing those outstanding activities within our community. I also want to mention the fact that as a father, as a superintendent educator, my son was able to graduate about a week ago now from the University of Toledo with his bachelor's degree with a 4.0 GPA in pharmaceutical science. He'll continue on for the next 2 years in his MBA program as well as in his first doctorate in pharmacy. That foundation for his success was built here in this district, from coaches to administrators to teachers to the support staff. All of them worked together across his 13 years in the district, and had an impact on him so he could be successful in his experience. My daughter just finished her first year at the University of Cincinnati, the same thing, very successful in the College of Business. The staff here did that, and they do it every day for each and every one of our students. They build that success. They build the opportunities for our students to go out and create ripple effects across not only our own community, this state, and this nation. There's so many success stories out there of what our students do each and every day. I'm proud to say that later in the agenda that we will approve graduates, the list of graduates that will walk across this stage this Saturday, about 340 of them. It's just amazing to me that this is the compilation of the work that we've done in this district to work with the parents, the community, and our students to get them across that stage. And while that stage might be scary as they walk across it, there's so many opportunities available to them as they move forward. I also want to recognize the fact that there's going to be some great performances from our band programs, 5 through 12, here the next 2 nights. I also want to recognize the fact that the concert band, symphonic band, and symphonic winds all received superior ratings from OMEA, the event in Findlay. Just more examples of the fact that the success our students see day in and day out, from whether it's our band, whether it's our FCCLA, whether it's FFA, whether it's other programs. We're seeing a lot of success with our students, and we'll highlight that again in our quality profile in the fall. So just wanted to mention those things, and I can't thank our staff enough for taking time to provide the outstanding educational opportunities, but more importantly, opportunities for our students to grow as individuals and be contributors in our society, and to prepare them for their future. So I wanted to mention those items and just thank our staff once again for the work that they do. So next item in the agenda, overnight trips. It's that time of year where we're approving a lot of summer trips because of camps and programs that are moving forward this summer. So you see those 7 listed there. There are 3 educational agreements for individual specific students based on their individual needs in item C. You have board policy updates. It's that time of year again where we get those recommendations for those, and I've shared those with Kyle and Jana as we work through those. Student handbooks, we're asking that you approve those for this next school year. We've done a lot of work to make them very similar as we move forward, so they have a similar feel, similar look, so that it's not it's easier for our students and parents to look through and experience as they go through K through 12. School and athletic fees, it's time to approve those for the next school year, so you have those listed as well. Our Director of Human Resources has asked that we make some slight modifications after we talked to the ticket manager from last year, Judy Carter, about making the changes in her job description for the future for that position. And then we went through negotiations with both our certified and classified unions, and so I'm asking that you approve those 2 contracts for the next 2 years. As Carrie mentioned, there are salary changes as well as changes in medical, the amount of medical insurance that they'll pay. Primarily in the salary changes, both staffs will receive approximately 3.0% increase in this next year, the 23-24 school year, and then a 2.75% increase in the second year. If you look at the CERB data, so you look throughout the state and you see the averages, those are right there with the averages over the next 2 years across the state of Ohio for school district employees. And then they'll pay more for their medical insurance as well in this agreement. And then, as I mentioned, the last item for this section is our graduate list. And so we're asking you, based on the recommendation from Dr. Pfefferly at the high school, to approve this list. It's always a very special day. While it's a conclusion program for them, it's a very proud day for their parents, for the district, our staff, and all the work that goes into getting them ready for that point to walk across that stage. And I have just one message for them as they do that. And it's go into the world and do well, but more importantly, go into the world and do good. And I think that's a great message to take with them as they walk across that stage. So, unless you have questions about any of what I said, that's a lot, I would ask that you approve items A through J in one motion.
Okay. Troy? Okay. And I didn't catch who that was. Jana? So Troy and Jana. And Carrie, would you please call roll?
Mr. Baden? Mrs. Brent?
Yes.
Mrs. Gwynn? Mr. Lutz? Mr. Miller?
All righty.
Thank you.
Yeah, and personnel recommendations.
Thank you. First item are resignations or retirements. You see the list as presented. Norm has been at White House Primary for many years. I know I had a conversation with Mr. Rhodes. He's a valuable person in that building, does a variety of things day in and day out. Arrives there very early in the morning and is there until the students leave and works with the staff and Mr. Rhodes and the administration there to do some great things. So we appreciate his service for many years in the district. Mrs. Meadows is a bus driver. She's moving out of the district and away from us, so she's resigning her position. Mrs. Brooks is going on to become a teacher, so she's going to do student teaching next year. And then Mrs. Miller is leaving us to be the Director of Special Education at Gibsonburg. So we wish them well moving forward. Item B, our employment. So the good news is that we're hiring another bus driver moving forward, and this individual has been a bus driver for us before, and will continue on for the remainder of this year and into next year. And then you see that we're hiring additional staff for next year. I did mention earlier that, while we have not filled some positions, we have had to fill some positions based on numbers in classrooms to keep those enrollments to where they need to be. But also, because our enrollments in special education have increased, we have to hire additional staff, because there's rules and regulations the state put in front of us to make sure that we're at certain numbers with those teachers in those classrooms. And so we have to hire 2 additional intervention specialists at this time for next year based on those number increases. Item C, substitute employees as listed there. Item D are the volunteers. We thank our volunteers. There's a lot of field trips going on right now, and a lot of people going out and helping, especially at the primary buildings, going out and helping to do those field trips, so we thank those individuals for that. We have 1 limited supplemental contract, just cleaning up a spot that we had for the play for this last year. Classified contracts, and this is where we're going into the normal May stuff, where we're approving contracts for the next school year. So you have the classified contracts in F, the continuing teacher contracts in G, the limited teaching contracts in H, the administrative contracts in I, and then the contract amendments in item J. So unless you have questions, I would ask that you approve A through J at this time in one motion.
Need a motion to approve unless there's some discussion? Jeff. In a second, please. Troy. And Carrie, would you please call roll?
Mr. Baden? Mrs. Brent?
Yes.
Mrs. Gwynn? Mr. Lutz? Mr. Miller?
Okay. Oh, yes. Okay.
So item K is the last one from my section, and those are supplemental contracts for next year based on the recommendation of Mr. Herman.
Okay. Need a motion to approve? Kyle, in a second. Jana. Okay, Carrie, would you please call roll?
Mr. Baden? Mrs. Brent?
Yes.
Mrs. Gwynn? Mr. Lutz? Mr. Miller?
All right. Thank you for that, Jen. At this point, we are going to open it up for comments from the public. We actually only have 3 speakers on our list for tonight. And I'm just going to read what I read last time. During the public comment section, we expect you to respect the right of everyone to have their own opinion and not disrupt them. If there are any disruptions, you may be asked to leave. If they continue, we may suspend our meeting. You'll each have 5 minutes to speak. And each speaker will only have 1 opportunity to speak. I'll call on each of you as you've, in the order that you signed in. State your name and address when you are up here to the mic, and the rules are on the agenda. And our first speaker is Jim Schlievert.
Good evening. I'm Jim Schlievert from 9000 Newberry Lane. When last we gathered here, we were told that the bathroom policy is a result of following the law. A few of us dispelled that. We discovered that it's more guidance and recommendation. It's not based on any legislated law or any case law. One case was brought up, that was the Highland case, but that is not an appropriate assessment. That case goes back to when President Obama was in and made an executive order to guarantee what he considered rights for people that were considered trans. Donald Trump took that and threw it out. So that order no longer exists. There was a district case here in Ohio, the 6th district that Mrs. Brent did mention last time, that ruled in favor of that school. I'm sorry, in favor of that student. But they stated right there in their summary that that ruling only applies to that student and that district, nobody else, because that rule no longer exists. So there are no case laws pertaining to this. A case that I did not talk about last time, it's a tangential subject but very similar, is also out of Ohio just in the last few years, out of the 6th Circuit. And that is called the, it's a professor from Shawnee State University, it's a public school here in Ohio, who was terminated in 2017 for not using a student's preferred pronouns. He filed lawsuit in 21, the 6th Circuit, which is the one that we based the other case on that was older that doesn't really apply, found in his favor that the school district violated his First Amendment rights of freedom of speech and freedom of religion. You cannot make somebody use a preferred pronoun or believe something or say something that they do not believe in or that's not real. In 2022, he was awarded $400,000. 6 states have passed bathroom bills, 15 have them going currently. State legislatures are made up of a lot of lawyers. And when they pass laws, they have constitutional lawyers that have to draft that law. How can you have states doing this if it's unconstitutional or a violation of a protected group, which it's not, violation of their rights? The last meeting I asked you to consider changing the policy. Now that's not something you can do in one day, not 1 week. You've got to come together, think on it, pray on it, listen to the public. But we're 5 weeks out now. You guys have a tough job. Being a board member is not like it used to be in the 70s or 80s. Back then, you had to decide what textbooks to use and be in a town parade. You guys are facing issues that we never dreamed we'd be dealing with, but it does require leadership. You're elected to lead us and to set an example. So, I know how 2 of you feel about this issue. The other 3 I do not know. If it's by the numbers, you would feel the way I do. 90% of the people in this district, at least, do not want this policy. 90% of the people in this district, at least, would support you, even at the threat of lawsuit, which I'm telling you is not going to happen. You can't show me one case that's happened. Your legal can't. This needs to be decided now, not over the summer, not at the beginning of the next school year. There are already people that have left this district because of this policy. Others are considering it. They're going to pull their kids out, put them in homeschooling or private schools. There are people that may not move into this district because of this policy. We need to decide this so that all of us know what we're dealing with when we come back in the fall. I'd like to ask the crowd here a question. For those of you that are here, by a show of hands, if you'd like the board tonight to decide on changing the policy, please show your hands. That's a majority, a pretty good majority. And I'm sure there's a big silent majority at home. How you vote be watched carefully. You have 4 seats that are up in the fall. If you decide not to vote today, that's really a vote. I think you know that I'm running for school board. If not, I am running for one of those 4 open seats. And if I'm sitting up there next year, next January, there's 2 promises I can make. 1, you will always know what I think on a topic if asked. And 2, I will never have a problem defending our children. Thank you.
Before I begin my speech, I want to thank Jim Fritz and Carrie Johnson for answering my emails this week. They did a great job. Mr. Fritz answered all 18 of my questions, and Ms. Johnson put everything into layman's terms so I could understand the upcoming thing for this facility, so thank you. Oh, sorry. I told Jim to adjust this for me, but thanks, Jim. Frank Dudas, 1185 Stiles Road. At the April 20th board meeting, Ms. Brent stated that she felt the board shouldn't be pressured by the community. I think she's wrong in this. She's a public servant, It's your job to do the will of the majority of the people. All of you on this board were voted by the majority, except for Mr. Lutz, who was installed after Andy Preen had to vacate his seat after his job was moved. I sat here last month and listened to people speak who approved of the transgender bathroom sharing. They made it seem that transgenders could do no harm and never do anything vindictive like the opponents say they did. Recent history proved that wrong. Alec McKinney, STEM school high school ranch shooter, identified as a trans male. Anderson Aldrich, Club Q shooter, identified as non-binary. Randy Stair, Eaton Township shooter, identified as trans female. Sonocha Mosley, Maryland Rite Aid shooter, identified as transgender. Audrey Hale, Nashville Covenant School shooter, identified as trans male. Nathan Stolzig, Ballard King County Sheriff shooter, identified as a trans female. The board's policy is wrong on the bathrooms just like it was wrong on COVID. You silenced our children with masks. You denied them in-person education so that we wouldn't lose out on ESSER funding for a virus that had a 99.97% survival rate. ESSER funding provided $4.5 million to the district. Instead of spending that money on ventilation and building upgrades, the board decided it would be better to use it on programs like extended learning and enrichment opportunities and intervention specialists to help the children returning to school. Children who had the school board and superintendent forced to stay at home and fall behind in learning. Then when they returned to school, they continued to fall behind because it was inadequate training due to them and their teachers being forced into mask by a lie that was propagated by saying it was the law. The board spent our ESSER money to pay for mistakes instead of using it for building upgrades. Now they're asking you for $45 to $70 million for building upgrades, and one of the things they want to upgrade is ventilation, which could have been paid for by ESSER. While campaigning for school board, I have had the pleasure of meeting wonderful new people who are truly worried about where our school is headed. I heard stories of 9-year-olds who think they're lesbians, 10-year-olds who think they're bisexual, children in primary schools and Fallen Timbers Middle School who are being bullied, some of them so bad that their parents are pulling them out of our school system. People have told me stories of students having sex in the bathrooms at high school. Our schools are deteriorating from within because of the failure of the school board and the woke policies of the administration. Bullying policies do nothing but embolden the bullies. Woke policies just encourage immoral behavior. It's like giving a drink to an alcoholic. The school is becoming the enabler. After my accident on November 30th, 2022, a friend of mine who has 20 years in auto accident reconstruction told me that it was amazing I survived. He said, Frank, I've seen a lot of accidents, and by the looks of your car, not many people walk away from that. You're very lucky. I told him it wasn't luck. I believe it was divine intervention. At this time, I started questioning why God left me here. Knowing everything I'd done in my life, he had many reasons to remove me from this earth. I asked him to show me why he left me here. What is it he wanted me to do? I started contemplating being more involved at church, maybe joining a life group. Then I saw the community getting fed up with the schools and how they worried about the indoctrination that was happening to our children. I thought maybe that's it. Maybe God wants me to be involved in school. So I prayed about it. Almost every night, my family reads from the Bible before our children go to bed. After I made a decision to run the school board, the next day on my way to work, the very same verse we read the night before was the first thing I heard on my podcast. The verse was Isaiah 41:10. It reads, Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee. Yea, I will help thee. I will uphold thee with my right hand to my righteousness. After hearing that, I felt God was telling me that this was why he allowed me to survive. There are 31,102 verses in the Bible, and the one I had read to my family the night before was the first thing that God wanted me to hear the next day. As a veteran and a father, I feel it's my calling to stand up for our children. I will be the voice of the silenced. I will be the protector of the innocent, and I will defend the vulnerable. I want the parents and especially the students to know I will be here for you. Thank you.
So I thought long and hard if I really wanted to do this. It's Shannon Bosselman, 875 Cherry Lane, Waterville. But my kids are worth it. I would like you to please discuss the proposal from Mr. Miller tonight, but that wasn't brought up. I wanted you to vote on it. wasn't done. Just because you all may not agree, at least let board members vote on it now. The last thing we need are children leaving the school district, since you may not make a decision until August. You told us at the meeting you would work diligently on this and would not have parents wait in limbo for long. It's a big topic. You've got parents involved. We care. The thought of even leaving the school district makes me want to scream, because I love Anthony Wayne Schools, and I want to keep it that way. But putting my child in a bathroom with the opposite sex, not okay with me. Because I can guarantee you that if my child would see someone of the opposite sex in the restroom when they go to the bathroom or locker room, if you don't have lawsuits from other people, you're going to get them from all the parents if they find that out. You guys have to think about that. Do you guys want lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit to put children in provocative situations that they're not entitled to? They're minors. This goes against Christian beliefs. There's no reason that they can't use the bathroom they're born as or use an alternate bathroom or locker room. There's no need for it. This is basically catering to their agenda. For what? Look at the population that you're catering to. What about all the people and all these kids that are uncomfortable? Should my daughter be scared to go to the bathroom? Do you want 600 kids lined up in the nurse's bathroom? Because I can guarantee you're going to get it if you don't change this policy. I love our teachers. I love this district. I'm mad I even have to be up here talking about this. This is something that's huge, and making parents wait till August is not okay, because they're going to say, you know, screw this, I'm taking my kids and I'm leaving the district. Is that what you want? Because that's what you're going to get. I mean, all of you, it sounds like Mr. Miller made a plan. Why aren't you talking about the plan? Why aren't you voting on the plan? Waiting till August? From what I know, there's one person sitting up there that's against it. That doesn't mean you all can't vote. We elected you to stand up there and protect our children and all children. I'm asking you to vote tonight so parents, students, staff, and administration can choose how to proceed in the future. Did you think about that? Do you think maybe the staff isn't going to want to work here because of that? Should the people with their masters in education have to guard a bathroom because you can't make a policy? Not okay. Morals and values cannot be overlooked. We preach respectful, responsible, and safe and involved. I'm proud of this district, and I hope it stays that way. But you got to think, you've got young kids now looking at you as leaders and examples and role models to follow the morals and values you're teaching them. So basically, if you're going to cater to those few kids and make all the other kids uncomfortable and use a separate bathroom, and how come no one knew about it? Parents should have been able to make that decision. These are minor children. You guys made exceptions for certain children without even informing the parents. To me, that's asking for a lawsuit also. So I thank you guys for all your service. I love the staff at Anthony Wayne. My son's going to be graduating. He's going to be a senior next year. And the thought of it just makes me sick, because I do not want to have to pull my daughter from the school district. But if you put her in an uncomfortable situation and she walks in and sees someone of the opposite sex, you will have a lawsuit. I can guarantee you that. So no one should see a naked person of the opposite sex in their bathroom. So if you cater to that, I don't know if I can keep my kid in this district. And I know there's tons of people that feel like that too. And it's a shame.
Okay, there are a few things that I would like to address. First of all, I heard two people today say that they're running for school board, and I know there's at least one other one in here, and I don't know who else, yeah. I would suggest that you go on the OSBA, Ohio School Board Association, I think it's .org, I'm not 100% sure, but go on their website. They used to call it So You Want to Be a Board Member Seminar. Now I guess it's just called Pre-Board Candidate Webinar in July. I would advise that you do take that because it really describes what your role as a school board member is. They also have a lot throughout the school year of other seminars to teach you what it means to be a school board member and how you go about doing the things that you do. I would like to communicate to you guys how seriously all 5 of us up here take our duty. We do represent all of the residents in this school district. Many comments have been made to us, false things that were said tonight. I have no idea where the word August came from. That was made up by someone in this room. At our April 20th work session, it was not a meeting, it was a work session. As the president of this school board, I took it upon myself to be a leader and to offer some things so we could have some discussion on it. And it was taken totally out of context. It was assumed exactly what my mind meant. Never, ever did I say August. I suggested that as of tonight, there are 9 school days left. This is not an easy decision for us. We have spent countless hours researching, talking to people. We chose, because this is our duty, to get some legal advice. We brought that to you last month. We told you we were advised by our legal counsel to not do this. We were told that that was a liberal law firm because it's based in Columbus, I guess. I don't know why you thought that. So you wanted local. We went to a law firm in Toledo. Almost verbatim, the exact same words. We've reached out to our different associations that we belong to as a school district. The same thing. We've also consulted with our contractor who works with us to make sure we write our policies within the limits of the law. The same thing. We actually, when we became school board members, we took an oath of office that says, somewhat paraphrased, I'm shortening it some, that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio. I will faithfully and impartially discharge my duties as a Board of Education member for the Anthony Wayne Local School District in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereinafter to be enacted. We don't make laws, we only do policies, so the laws are made above us. I feel very passionate about this, and none of you know, I bet you there's not very many people in here that know anything about me other than this seat that I'm sitting in up here. You have no idea how much time and dedication I have given to Anthony Wayne Schools for over 30 years. My family moved to this district for my oldest to start kindergarten here because in 1990, and today too, it is an excellent school district. My 3 children received an education from this school that they still talk about to this day. Places that they go, they know, people outside of our district know Anthony Wayne Schools and the quality of education that we provide. there have been some absolutely awful things being said about us as board members. My name even got mentioned tonight with false accusations. Some of the blasphemy and the accusations and the words being used to describe us are something that you would absolutely not approve of your children saying.
Frank, not necessary. Frank,
Enough. This is taking a toll on all of us. You guys just don't even want to recognize that, and your terrible words are making it all the more traumatic. We understand that we're not going to please everyone in this district, and that is very difficult for us. We are human beings as well. What you have resorted to, as someone mentioned tonight, is basic bullying. It's the definition of bullying.
no, just stop. Just stop. Just stop. It's on item 7. We're getting to it.
If it doesn't stop, you are going to be asked to leave. Bye. Okay, I shouldn't have done that. So 2 months has been too long for you. What have we been doing? Understanding what other school districts are doing in our area, in our state, even across the country. I've talked to countless parents. I've talked to countless grandparents, people that don't have children in our district. And I already told you about the our legal advice that we were given. Just to give a quick summary on what they say, what they have told us as to why we do what we need to stand by as what we're going to do. Anyways, First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States protects freedom of speech and expression. Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment guarantees every citizen protection under the law, including unfair or discriminatory actions. Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972 prohibits schools that receive federal funding from discriminating against a student on the basis of sex, including sexual orientation or gender identity. FERPA, which is the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, protects the privacy of student records, including disclosure of personally identifiable information for student records. So no, we can't call you up and tell you. HIPAA protects individually identifiable health information. And Anthony Wayne has multiple board policies of anti-discrimination, harassment, and bullying that includes gender identity. At this point, I'm going to let the rest of my board or fellow board members make some comments, and we'll proceed. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll start. I prepared a little bit so I wouldn't forget. Thank you for your attendance tonight. This has definitely been one of the more challenging subjects that I've faced in my 7.5 years on the school board, next to COVID. We did say we would work with urgency and diligently. I believe we have since the last major board meeting 1 month ago. I do find this a little perplexing that this procedure is the same that we've had in place today. It has not changed. Dr. Fritz did not write a new policy. Nothing has changed during my tenure or during my kids growing up here through their entire education. Suddenly, this is the highest priority issue for some people, even though the rules have not changed. For others, I did engage the community, like Pam said. There's people that have no issue of this at all or haven't even heard of it. Some are silent. There's a silent majority that says let the board and administration work towards the best solution that we need. We are not any different than the majority of other Ohio schools. Teachers, students, resource officers that we've talked to, they do state the feedback is that this is not an issue in the school today. They're the ones in the school all day long that we're getting this feedback. We're talking about very few people for very few minutes of a day, if it's even used, for someone to walk into a room, into a private stall to do your business, walk back out, wash your hands, and return to the hall. No matter what a person looks like on the outside, there should not be a risk of privacy or safety in this room. The privacy and safety in the individual stall is the same as it's always been. We did have a working session meeting. I will say that I, along with several of us, were talking about the option to have two choices for every student. Several of us talked through this issue. It was a seemingly general approach that seemed to satisfy most people's desires to say every child would have two choices, one of your biological choice, or one of your biological birth, or you can use a single stall. Anybody can use the single restrooms that are available. But what we found when we dig deeper is to that, there's unintended consequences to every decision and every rule. There are transgender persons that fully look, act, live such that no one would ever know their biological sex that they are. So if we enacted a procedure like this, we said, of your biological, seemingly looking male with female anatomy, which we do have, could walk into the women's restroom, which I think is not the intention that you would want from this rule. There are people we encounter every day that have features or appearances that are not aligned to their birth origin. You cannot firmly describe as male or female. So potentially solving one issue for some will potentially cause issues for others. So as Pam noted, we took advice from the public opinion. Last meeting you said maybe we should get a legal opinion from the local area, which we did. We've been advised on this topic. The procedure cannot be written as we dictated to dictate the transgender bathroom usage. So we have two legal briefings advising us of the same thing. In my capacity as a representative and fiduciary of the entire district of Anthony Wayne Schools, in this case, I cannot in good faith go against legal advice that we are using. If you want to elect somebody that goes against legal advice, I understand. But in this case, I can't support the two-choice proposal that has been discussed in the work session. Bathrooms and locker rooms do have full privacy stalls. Boys cannot just choose one day to walk into the girls' restroom. That is not an option. That's against the expectations of a general. And as a final note, I wanted to also, some of the comments from Pam, that Dr. Fritz did not create a new policy. He's acted under the same procedures that we've enacted in place for years. And during the same time frame that I've been on the board and well before that, we've had a district that's improved in overall standings, is rated as one of the top public schools in Ohio, continues to turn out outstanding opportunities for students that are future ready for all situations. And I'll also ditto Pam or Kyle or Troy or Jana. None of us have felt bullied. I have not felt bullied by Pam or any other members. I cannot count the number of conversations I've had with each one of these guys and ladies over the past month. But we're always respectful. We listen to each other. We walk through the options. We walk through the controversy, and that's what we've done to come to this decision. And ultimately, though, I'm deferring to the legal decision that, as a district, I'm bound to, look out and follow our legal advice. Otherwise, what good is our system? So that's my comments for now.
All right, I didn't write anything down because I didn't really know where to start, and words just didn't seem to fit on the page for me. But I do want to reiterate the other two, Vice President and President of the Board, to advocate. Dr. Fritz, you do a tremendous job with our district. Our teachers, you guys are second to none. I graduated from this district. I met my wife in this district. My family's been here. My dad's graduated from here. We love Anthony Wayne. We all come from different ideas, different things. As they stated, we have gone through 2.5 months of this when it was brought up, and we all have different opinions, just as you. As it's been out in the community, I do support the 2-bathroom option idea, in which we will be voting on a procedure in Section 7 of our agenda today, in which I will be promoting that, and the board has every option and right to vote on that or vote it down. But I do want to reiterate, we hear you, we hear both sides, we've talked about it. I, as Pam, have also been, I was at the store not 2 weeks ago with my 4 going on 5-year-old son, where I was berated in front of my son. I had to pick him up and unfortunately had to leave the store, but we do hear you. Just ask to be respectful. That's all I ask for. Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, everybody. So this is a tough topic, and I know we're going to get to that next, so I won't belabor that point. I'd like to think that we could have a procedure, right, that designates that we have men's rooms, boys' rooms, girls' rooms, women's rooms, and some all-gender restrooms. And some all-gender let me back. Can you hear me better now? Yeah, sorry. So where my head's at, I'd like to think that we could have a procedure that states, right, that we have boys' rooms and girls' rooms and some private all-gender options, right? And I think that's what, that's kind of where my head's at, right? The last thing I want is to be discriminatory against anybody, right? I don't want to single anybody out. I don't want to make life hard for anybody. To Jeff's point, it's about, right, a really short period of time just to go in and kind of do your business, I think is what you said. And that's where my head's at. So I don't want to belabor the point anymore. I've lost a lot of sleep over this. It's a very difficult, stressful topic. What I do want to touch on is I was really, really motivated at the beginning of this meeting tonight, Jim, when you were giving the update of everything that's going on. Despite, right, this topic, everything else that's going on is amazing in this district, right? The staff sitting at the other end of this table and the rest of the staff, they've worked through 2 contract negotiations and all of the union reps, and that's been solved, right? That is a really, really big deal. That's fantastic work. Really, really fantastic work. And that's Jim, that's Kevin, that's Carrie. That is fantastic, right? The 5-year budget, that is a really big deal, right? There's a lot of effort that goes into managing that budget and understanding what to do, right, when the ESSER funds go away. I support the way the ESSER funds were used. I've had children in the district that have benefited from the use of those funds the way they were used. But that money's going away, right? That budget has to be managed. That has to be figured out. And the group sitting down here at the end of the table has done that. That is absolutely fantastic work. I have the privilege of working in an enormous industry, the automotive industry, with really big companies, right? the organization that this staff provides, right, the dedication that this staff provides, the work that they put in, the hours that they put in, is second to none. I don't see this type of work ethic anywhere, right, except here. Jim and the staff, they answer every email. They're prompt. They're better than I am, right? They're answering emails before I even had a chance to read them. It's just really, really fantastic work. So I started this meeting being really, really motivated with the great work, the collaborative. I'd like to spend a couple $100 million and make this world class, right? I'm not sure we'll get there, but that's fantastic work. So I just want to thank the staff. I want to thank Jim. I want to thank Kevin. I want to thank Carrie. I want to thank Pam for leading us through this, right? There is a ton of really good stuff going on. And we're going to get to this other piece that I really don't care for. I'd rather focus on everything else that we talked about, making sure that we're keeping everybody safe and that we're doing what we can. But what matters to me is the curriculum and the work that we talked about in the first, portion of this meeting. So that's all I had.
All right. And I apologize for being upset, but I'm very passionate about this as well. And I guess I'd reached my pinnacle. I'm tired of being called a bully, basically, so. We can move on. All right, at this time, I'm going to read a procedure that we have all worked on that we're going to vote on to be placed into the student handbooks. Here it reads, Anthony Wayne local schools provide restrooms and locker rooms for students, staff, and visitors. These facilities are marked as men, boys, women, girls, or all-gender single private restrooms and changing rooms. It is expected that all persons will consistently use a restroom that is typically aligned with their biological sex assigned at birth. Individual needs for other accommodations or increased privacy should be addressed to building administration. All persons are expected to respect each other's privacy and dignity when using the restrooms and locker rooms. Inappropriate behavior or violation of school policy and procedures will result in disciplinary action. Anthony Wayne Local Schools is committed to providing an environment free of discrimination, harassment, intimidation, or bullying for all persons. At this point, I would ask for a motion to place the aforementioned text into the student handbooks for the 2023-2024 school year. Troy? And a second, please. Jeff? All right. Carrie, would you please call roll?
Mr. Baden? Mrs. Brent? Mrs. Gwynn? Mr. Lutz? Mr. Miller?
Okay. Well, that passed by majority. At this point, ask if there's any other comments that.
I make a motion to put into effect the procedure that I had proposed that reads, in an effort to promote inclusivity and accommodate the needs of all students and visitors, I propose a procedure for district facilities. Under this procedure, individuals will have two options for restroom and locker room use. The first option is to use the facilities that correspond with the student and visitor's biological sex assigned at birth. The second option is to utilize the single-stall, gender-neutral restrooms, which are open to all students and visitors. By offering these options, the district aims to ensure that all individuals feel safe and comfortable while using the facilities and district facilities.
Kyle, did you actually say motion for that? Okay, I didn't. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. All right, is there a second for that? It appears not, so unfortunately, if there's not a second, that motion dies. But thank you, Kyle, for your input into this. So, I believe that's the extent of our conversations on bathrooms. I'm sorry? There was no second. I'm sorry?
What about sports team? What's your policy? And I was told by Mr. Herman that you also can allow opposite sex person to be on sports teams. So when are you going to address
You know what? We have not gone there. I'm going to.
We need to.
Yeah, so the Iowa High School Athletic Association has rules and regulations addressing transgender participation in athletics at this time. It's also under, right now, in legislation, there is a proposal to have single-sex athletics within all Ohio schools. We should know the results of that here in the next 4 weeks. Okay? So I think it's prudent to wait to see what that legislation, what happens with that legislation before we make a decision moving that forward. Okay?
All right, at this point, we are going to go into an executive session to discuss employment of public employees. I need a motion to go into executive session. Kyle? Oops, in a second. Jana? Okay. And Carrie, would you please call roll?
Mr. Baden, Mrs. Brent, Mrs. Gwynn, Mr. Lutz, Mr. Miller.
All right. We will not conduct any additional business when we come out. You're welcome to stay, but all we'll be doing when we come out is adjourning the meeting. Thank you for attending. All right, I need a motion to come out of executive session. Kyle and Jana. And we noted the time at 8:43. All right, Carrie, would you please call roll?
Mrs. Bryn? Yes. Mrs. Gwynn? Mr. Lutz? Mr. Miller?
All right, and a motion to adjourn, please. Jana? Kyle? And Carrie, would you please call roll?
Mr. Fagan? Yes. Mrs. Bryn?
Yes.
Mrs. Gwynn? Mr. Lutz? Mr. Miller?
Thank you, everyone.